Hello, my name is Timothy Foley. I'm a former integrated Master of Science student on the Archaeology of Heritage Science pathway at Queen's University of Belfast. I'm working professionally now, and I'm based in Glasgow, and I ended up meeting uh, uh, a person who is called Eithne Ní Lamhna, who is the descendant of Ellen Pendergast, who was Ireland's first woman to become a professional archaeologist on the island of Ireland. And she was based in the National uh, Museum in Dublin. It's an amazing story, a period of historical change in Ireland where you start to see women coming into archaeology and that facing hardship as a result. And Ellen achieved a lot of amazing positive things um, given the circumstances. So I thought we'd do something special and pay tribute to this person's life through their descendants. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Eithne Ní Lamhna.
Thank you, Tomoid. Well, to us, she was simply Auntie Nellie, the twin sister of my granny Catherine, both daughters of farmers from Killure in County Kilkenny. They both went to primary school and secondary school locally, and during secondary school they won a scholarship to spend the summer down in Coláiste na Rinne in Ring, County Waterford, which gave them both a lifelong love of the Irish language, which they passed on to all of us. And after secondary school, they both stayed on for a finishing year. And part of the programme of that was sport. And they both played camogie for their school team, reaching the All-Ireland Schools final and playing on Croke Park. So they were both accomplished sportswomen as well as academics.
If you could summarise her character, what would that be like?
Oh, Auntie Nellie was a charismatic lady. She was intelligent and opinionated and quick with a witty remark. But she always had a mischievous smile. As an aunt, or a grand aunt in our case, though we were never allowed to make her feel old and call her that, she was a wonderful woman to have your back. My fondest memory of her is waking up one Monday morning as a 10-year-old with a huge surprise at the end of my bed. Auntie Nellie had visited a week or so before, and she had sat down and talked to me about myself and what I wanted to do. And music must have cropped up, and I told her, probably with some dramatic bitterness, that I wanted to play the fiddle, but my parents wouldn't buy me a fiddle because they had spent over £100 on a flute for my sister, and she never practiced, so I would just do the same. I don't remember Auntie Nellie saying much to me at the time, but she listened sympathetically and probably enjoyed my completely unfounded 10-year-old indignation. I discovered later that she had told my mother after that conversation that she had a fiddle in her attic that I could have. So, without saying a word to me, my mother met up with her one Sunday night and left the fiddle at the end of my bed. So I woke up the next morning with a great surprise, and it was a really life-changing moment for me. I still play the fiddle to this day, not quite that fiddle. I did graduate onto a better fiddle a few years later, but my eldest daughter even started to learn on that same fiddle. That story is really characteristic of Auntie Nellie. She sat and listened to a 10-year-old girl encouraging me to think about what I wanted to do, and then she did what she could to help me. And that is how Ellen Prendergast lived her life, championing those around her that she felt that she could help, especially girls.
With her hair thrown over her shoulder, tied up with a black velvet band.
What made her want to become an archaeologist?
One of the nuns during her finishing year in secondary school saw an ad in the paper from the National Museum looking for persons skilled at sketching. And Auntie Nellie must have been very good at drawing because the nun recommended it to her, and she got the job as a technician in the National Museum. And it was from there, probably inspired by all the work that she saw at the museum, that she attended UCD and first got a BA and then an MA in Celtic archaeology and became a professionally employed archaeologist, the first woman in Ireland to do so.
Can you tell us about her life at the National Museum of Ireland?
My mother, Mary, as the eldest daughter of her twin sister, Catherine, got a great view into her aunt's life in the museum in Dublin. She would spend her holidays with her aunt, often accompanying her into work. And she remembers how really happy Auntie Nellie was in her work at the museum. She loved her job, was exceptionally good at it, and was also very popular with the staff. My mother remembers that 11s in Auntie Nellie's office were a highlight of the day. Auntie Nellie would put the kettle in and all the men would troop in for a cup of tea and a biscuit and a lively chat. She was also a wonderful mentor for the younger staff at the museum, especially the women, understanding as she did the challenges that they faced that their male colleagues didn't. She was invited by UCD to speak to archaeology students there, and she also spent a great deal of time mentoring the students personally through their studies. And of course, she travelled the country for digs and research, and indeed she also travelled the world, making friends wherever she went.
Can you tell us more about the challenges she may have faced as a woman in archaeology and what she did to counter that?
Well, it certainly was a man's world, but I think she dealt with it the way she dealt with life, with a quick wit and determination to succeed. She was dealt with a few tough blows professionally in latter years in the museum. She applied for the position of directorate, which in itself was a huge step for a woman at that time. And she was unsuccessful, unfortunately. And to overcome her disappointment, she decided to channel her energies into something more positive and decided to study for a doctorate. But the second blow came when, during her studies for her doctorate, she was forbidden access to the museum's library, which made it impossible for her to complete her thesis. And that was heartbreaking for her. But she continued to work as hard as ever and to as high a standard as ever.
She seems to have made quite an impact on your mother. Tell us a little about why that is.
Well, my mother's time in Dublin with her aunt certainly gave her a rich cultural education not available to children growing up on a farm in those days. She tells one story of when she was about 10 or 11 and Auntie Nellie took her to a piano recital, and she sat excitedly with a bag of sweets that had been bought for her before the performance. And as the music started, she reached her hand into the bag to get a little boiled sweet to enjoy while she was listening to the music, only to feel a gentle hand on her shoulder or on her arm, letting her know that she wasn't to make noise with the wrappers, so she had to sit through the recital with the bag tempting her from her lap. So my mother had the best of both worlds, growing up in the country and holidays in the city, surrounded by culture and history and the Irish language. But I don't think even that was the biggest impact that Auntie Nellie had on my mother. I think, along with my granny, she instilled in my mother and her sisters the importance of an education for girls. And not to accept the limitations put on women by society. She gave her a very strong sense of the injustice suffered by women, and she opened up her eyes to the unfairness of sexism, but also the possibility available when you choose to oppose it.
What would you say was the overall impact she had on you and your family, the lasting influence?
Well, as a child, I didn't understand the influence she had on my life and that of my extended family, of the children of her sister Catherine and her brothers John and Frank and their children in return. But as an adult, I see her influence in the everyday conversations about sexism that I have with my children, the youngest of whom I actually named after Catherine and Ellen. Her achievements showed generations of men and women in our family that a woman can do anything a man can and can do it just as well, and don't you listen to anyone who tells you otherwise. And along with her sister, she left a legacy of strong women with a tendency to call out sexism when we see it. And she also opened us up to the world beyond Ireland, available to a woman not afraid to travel alone. And we all took advantage of that example.
Speaking more broadly, what do you think Ellen's legacy has been and the impression she would have liked to leave to younger women in archaeology across the world?
Well, we've heard from archaeologists who were impressed with her competence and diligence and her professionalism. And I'm sure through her work and her personal dedication to mentoring her colleagues in the museum that she has left a very strong legacy in the realms of archaeology in Ireland. Unquantifiable perhaps, but strong nonetheless. I think the impact she would have liked to leave archaeologists, young and old, male and female, is that when you raise women and men up equally, everyone benefits. Thanks, Tamoid. Really enjoyed talking to you.